So what we're going to do is a presentation aimed at our new recruits, but that will also be a useful refresher for existing staff. What we do is we recruit people on the values, which rarely change, rather than the skills that can be gained or trained throughout their time working with us. We figure people fit into one of four boxes. So there's people that have got our values and get results. We want to do everything we can to keep those people. So we empower them, we promote them, we give them pay rises, whatever it is we can do or they want us to do, we do, because they're effectively like gold dust to us. On the flip side of that, we've got people that don't have our values and they don't get results. We've made a mistake in the interview, replace them as soon as possible. Then you've got the two sets of people that don't fit into either of those boxes. So you've got people that have got your values, but they don't get results. So you're going to train them, retrain them. Eventually, if they're still not getting the results, you might want to move them to a different position where they do get results. So we had someone that worked for us in sales that wasn't particularly good at finding out who the decision maker was very good at building relationships, but then was almost a little bit too scared to ask for the deal at the end of the conversation. So we moved her to client services, where she was already given the decision maker. She was just there to build the relationship. She didn't have to ask for the business at the end because they were already on board. And she became really good at that, and then moved into the box where she had our values and got results. Eventually, though, if in a new position someone doesn't get the results, you have to get rid of them, but you do it in the nicest possible way. So you give them good references, try to help them find new jobs. Then you've got, on the flip side of that, people that are getting results, but they don't have your values. So with that, another good example is sales. You might have a salesperson that's hitting their monthly target every single month, but they just don't have the values. So they're out the door at 5 o'clock on a Friday saying, oh, by the way, there's an issue with that client, but I'm out of here. Can you deal with it? And they just throw it on someone else's table. Then there's no teamwork in that at all. So with that person, you get rid of them when it's convenient. So you have a replacement lined up, but you do it very publicly in terms of you let everyone in the office know that you got rid of them because they didn't have the values and they were making everyone else's life a lot harder than it needs to be. So they're the sort of four people that we generally see in interviews, and we're obviously recruiting very heavily on the values as of this year, and we've seen fantastic results as a result of doing that. So the way we look at it is there's no right or wrong values. There's just different values. For all of our values that we have, and we have 9 different values that we've put into 3 sentences, we've listed a 10 out of 10 guru that we aspire to be. A 1 out of 10 is basically you're doing the job you've paid to do, so it's no bad thing at all. And so in many ways it's on a scale of 0 to 100. The fact that you're working for us, we think you're in the top 10% already. So a 1 out of 10 is effectively a 91 out of 100 for anyone else. And then if you're a minus score or below that sort of top 10%, you're just not right for us. So there's no right or wrong, but you're just not going to match us. So it's not going to be a long-term solution. So our job here at EMJ, once we've got you on board, is to motivate you, it's to inspire you, and it's to incentivize you to be the best you can. So we're looking for a team full of gold medal winners. The way we see what we're doing is that we're on a bus journey. Our destination is to become the go-to place for healthcare professionals in Europe by 2025. And the values we see as the music on the bus. So anyone is welcome to get on the bus, but you've got to have our values, i.e. if you don't have the values or you don't like our music, don't try and change it. You know, as I say, there's no right or wrong, but just get off the bus. It's not going to work out. So it's far better that you get off now rather than sit there trying to argue with us all changing the music. We want to do it in a certain way. We believe it's the right way, and that's the way we're going to do it. So the sort of people that we're looking for, and the sort of people that we want to come on this bus journey, first of all, again, people fit into 2 categories. They're either sponges or rocks. A sponge is just soaking up all that knowledge and information and always wanting to improve and get better. And a rock is someone that sits there and basically says, well, I know everything already. You can't teach me anything new. So we're looking for sponges. We want people with the skills or the potential to have the skills to be a gold medal winner, And as I say, we're looking for the people that have got our values. The values that we live and die by fit into the sort of the EMG format of 3 sentences. So we've got them as E, M and G starting the sentences. The E stands for entire buy-in. So everyone's got loyalty to our vision, our values and our culture and the long-term goals of EMG. And we're committed to doing so in a positive and passionate way. The M, we've made make sure you're self-reliant. It was look after your own shit, but that doesn't fit in with the letters. But that's effectively what it is. You need to be proactive and responsible for your own actions. If you are, it leads to an inspiring place to work that everyone's proud of. And the G is going the extra mile, always giving your best performance. This will create a team that's different to anything else and full of hard-working gold medal winners. So what we'll do now is to go through those 10 out of 10 examples for each one of the 9 values that we mentioned in there. First one is proactive, and for this it's all about that continuous improvement. There's a phrase I heard mentioned recently at an event where Graham Gooch, the ex-England cricket captain, and the sort of head of development for Essex County Cricket Club that have just won the county championship for the first time in 25 years, having been promoted from the 2nd division to the 1st division, then winning the 1st division. Someone said to him, you know, how's it going, Graham? You look like you're on track. And he said, yep, but as we all know, if you don't keep moving, you get hit. So it's one thing being on track, but you can't just stay where you are on that track. You've got to be constantly moving and constantly improving. The 10 out of 10 we've got there is Jack Welch, who was the CEO at GE Healthcare. And the way they did things, I'm not saying we necessarily agree with the way they did it, but it's a great example of continuously improving what you do, is they would rank all of their employees on a scale of 1 to 100. The top 20%, they reinvested in, they spent huge amounts of time and money and effort on improving them and rewarding them. They were probably some of the best paid and rewarded employees in the world at the time. The middle 70% were trained to become even better and to try and push the top 20% even further. And the bottom 10% were simply let go. Now, some of them were exceptionally skilled staff, but they just weren't in the top 100% at GE, which meant they had no issue whatsoever walking into a job pretty much anywhere else. But it was just Jack Welch's way of saying, we can't stand still. If you're in the bottom 10%, you've got to keep moving and improving. And if you stay there, we'll get rid of you and find someone that's better than you. So it's always looking to improve and not stand still, because if you stand still, other people overtake you. The next one is different. Steve Jobs is our guru for being different. Many people don't know that he actually set up Apple and then was sacked in 1985 when the company was relatively big, nowhere near the beast that it is now. But he got sacked, and eventually he returned and took over with the company pretty much bankrupt. And he built it into the multi-billion-pound business that it is now. The way he did that was being completely different. So he walked in, completely streamlined all the product range they had out there, went down to literally 2 or 3 products, and he did a massive advertising campaign. He had billboards all around Times Square in America. He was on the front of the FT. He was on television, radio. But what was completely different about his campaign was not once did it actually mention Apple in the campaigns. He was so confident that people would understand or be inquisitive about what they were talking about that he didn't mention it, and it got so much publicity on the back of that that he overtook all of his competitors by doing that. So it's just that completely buying into what you're doing, believing what you're doing, but doing it completely differently. Our next one is loyal. For this, we use Richard Branson. There's many things he could be described as in terms of our values, but for loyalty, he's got his team of at the Virgin corporate headquarters. I think there's about 200 or 300 staff there, and he lets them take as much holiday as they want. You don't have to tell people you're going on holiday. You don't have to say how much time you're taking off. He just trusts you. He's got that loyalty that you won't muck up and you won't get it wrong, and that you will have a target and you'll make sure your target's hit. As long as your target's hit, he doesn't care how you do it. in terms of when you're in the office, when you're out the office, how much holiday you take, because he knows that if you don't do it, someone else will come in the next year and do a better job. In terms of our own examples we've got in the company, Dan, who owns 20% of the business, joined me 6-7 years ago as a sales guy. Nothing more, nothing less. He's worked so hard and completely bought into what we're doing that he now owns 20% of the business as a reward for the hard work he's done. So that's just a great example of the loyalty that Dan's shown to me and I've shown to Dan for showing all of our values. The next one is gold medal winner. For this, we've used Sir Clive Woodward. He termed a phrase, or coined a phrase, I should say, critical non-essentials, which is basically, if you want to improve something, if you say, I want to make a 50% improvement, it's very hard to necessarily come up with something that's going to make such a big impact. Whereas if you break everything down into small pieces, to say, for example, 100 small pieces, and you can improve each one of those by 1%, that gives you a 100% improvement. It's much easier to go in and find those little things that you can change. And we're just reading a book at the moment called 2 Second Lean, which is the same concept again. You go in there and just look at tiny little things that will make those improvements and add them all up. Dave Brailsford with Team Sky has become very successful doing the same thing, and he calls it marginal gains. But it's just looking at those little things and looking at every little detail and seeing how we can make those improvements. The next one is proud. So for this, during when the space race was on and NASA were trying to be the first people to put a man on the moon, President Kennedy went round to the NASA Space Center in 1962, and he was having a grand tour and finding out how they were going to put the man on the moon for the first time ever, which was completely, no one thought it was possible. And as he was walking along the corridor, he spots this janitor carrying his brush and stops to have a conversation and just says, what is it you do here? And the guy turns around and says, I'm putting a man on the moon. And he just so bought into the whole concept and the whole project that they were trying to do that he was just seeing himself as a small cog in a machine, but a cog that was very, very important to what they were trying to achieve. And it just shows you how much that everyone can play a part in that thing if they're sort of proud and singing off the same hymn sheet. The next one is passionate. For this, we've got Eddie Izzard. He saw a lot of stuff about sport relief and the work that it does, and became very passionate about trying to do something himself. He was completely unsporty. He didn't even own a pair of running shoes at the time. And he arranged to meet the guy that organises it all for sport relief. And the meeting was in London, and he lives about 20 miles out of London, so he decided to run there, or ended up walking there, having never run in his life, and he didn't even have, as I say, a pair of trainers. He eventually got there about 8 hours later and was so inspired by the work that they were doing, he ended up setting off on a mission to complete 43 marathons in 51 days, which just shows you again, if you put your mind to it, anything is possible. So he had no specific training as an athlete, but he accomplished it, and actually in his last marathon got his personal best. The next one we've got is hard working. Now for us, hard working isn't necessarily about going over and above 9 to 5 just to get your work done. That's just inefficiency or overwork if you're not doing that. What we're talking about is staying late or getting in early to develop yourself personally, to make sure you're a better person, because then you're constantly improving, and if you're improving, that means we as a company are improving. Our 10 out of 10 here is Kobe Bryant, who's probably one of the most successful basketball players of all time, certainly in the last 20 years. And he was always regarded as a very hard worker, and at one point he broke his wrist, and he was always the first one into training, and his teammates used to always sort of joke about it and try and beat him in, and they could never beat him in. And the day he broke his wrist, they said, at least we're going to beat him in tomorrow. And he was right-handed, I believe, and he broke his right wrist, and when they got in the next day, he was there practicing with his left hand, just trying to improve that. He also was in part of the dream team of the American basketball team at the Olympics. And bearing in mind, you've got a squad there of 5, 10, 15 players that are the best in the world. They arranged to meet at breakfast at 8 o'clock and then go off and do their training. When they got to breakfast, he was sat there in his tracksuit, sweat poured off him, and he'd been up for an hour training already. So even when he's in the company of 5, 10 of the best players in the world. He was still constantly trying to improve himself. Next is positive. For positive, it's Ben Hunt Davis, who won Olympic gold in rowing. They were a team of what I would call average elite sports people. So they were fantastically talented, but never quite getting onto the podium at the international stage. What they did was they'd come fourth at the Europeans and fifth in the World Championships, and it got to the point where they just decided that, you know, we either give up or we've got to do something completely different. And so they went down the route of working on a basis that they would only do things if it made the boat go faster. And that included things like talking to the press. So they wanted to be surrounded by positive people. So if they spoke to the press and the press put negative reports in the papers about them, they wouldn't talk to those guys anymore. If they spoke to different press and they put positive stories in there, they would keep talking to those guys, so that they just kept having that positive feedback from everywhere they looked. And next for us is inspiring. For me, as a Liverpool fan, it's quite hard to say this, but Sir Alex Ferguson, when he joined Man U in 1986, he was determined to rebuild the whole club, not just the team. He was almost sacked within a year or two, but went on to be the most successful manager ever. And over 20 years, he was at the top of his game, winning more trophies than anyone else has done. And even right at the end of his career, he was still the first one in the office or in training every single morning, because he was just so passionate, and he bought into what he was doing so much. And the fact that they won the league that last season he was there, and then finished 7th the year after with pretty much the same team, just shows you how inspiring he was to the rest of his teammates. So that is the EMJ values and how we look at 10 out of 10s and 1 out of 10s. Hope that's been helpful. And if you've got any questions, please do come and ask.